In the cold, dark stretch of space, a massive alien cruiser floated silently. It was a beautiful ship, made of sleek silver metal that gleamed under the distant stars. The ship was traveling through a peaceful sector of the galaxy, one that the crew knew was usually safe. On board, the captain, an alien girl named Lyra, sat at the command station, staring out at the stars. She was young, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen much more than her years should have allowed. Lyra had been trained for this moment for years. As the captain of the cruiser, she was expected to lead with courage and strength. Her people, the Valsorians, were powerful and respected throughout the galaxy. They had advanced technology, but they also carried a heavy burden and expectation to remain superior to all others. Humans, in their eyes, were weak and insignificant. Lyra had never thought much about humans, but she had always believed that their place in the galaxy was beneath the Valsorians. As the cruiser cut through the cold, empty space, Lyra's sensors picked up something strange. Her brow furrowed as she examined the data. There was a ship moving toward them, and it was moving fast. She didn't recognize the vessel, and it seemed too small to pose any threat. However, something in her gut told her to be cautious. "Captain, we've detected an unknown ship approaching at high speed," the communication officer said nervously. Lyra's voice was steady as she gave orders to adjust the ship's course. "Activate shields. Prepare for anything." But just as the crew began to respond, the unknown ship fired. The sudden shock of the blast shook the cruiser, and alarms blared throughout the ship. Lyra felt the tremor beneath her feet and gripped the control panel tightly. It was happening too fast. The shields had been activated too late, and the enemy ship's weapons were strong. "Report," Lyra demanded, her voice sharp. "The shields are failing, Captain. Our engines are damaged. We're losing power." The engineer shouted. Lyra's heart raced. Her crew scrambled to make repairs, but the damage was too much. She could feel the cold fear creeping into the air as the crew realized the situation was dire. The enemy ship was relentless, firing on the cruiser with precision. It wasn't just an attack, it was an ambush. Her ship, the pride of the Valsorian fleet, was being torn apart. "Captain, we're losing contact with the outer sections," the communications officer cried. "I can't reach anyone beyond the bridge." Lyra's eyes darted around the room, looking at the faces of her crew. They were all trying their best, but nothing seemed to work. The ship was going down. In the midst of the chaos, Lyra made a decision. She knew what had to be done. "Prepare the escape pods," she ordered. "Everyone evacuate, now!" But before anyone could move, a voice came through the comms, one that she didn't recognize. "This is the human pilot, Marcus. I've received your distress signal. I'm coming to help." Lyra stared at the comms screen. A human? She was surprised. Her people had always thought of humans as nothing more than insignificant creatures, barely capable of surviving in space. Yet here was a human pilot offering to help. It didn't make sense. "Stay away," she said, her voice cold and commanding. "This is Valsorian business. You have no place here." But the human didn't back down. "I've made my decision. I'm coming in." "Prepare yourselves," the voice replied. The crew looked to Lyra for direction. Her fingers hovered over the controls, unsure of what to do. Should she allow this human to risk his life for something that wasn't his problem? Part of her didn't want to accept help from someone so beneath her. Yet another part of her realized that she had no other options. She was losing her ship, and her crew was in danger. As the alien cruiser continued to take fire, Lyra stood at the helm, her hands trembling slightly despite her best efforts to remain calm. The ship's condition was worsening by the second. She had given the order for evacuation, but many of her crew were still scrambling to keep the ship afloat, trying to fix the damage in vain. Her people were strong, but in the face of a deadly attack like this, even their best efforts couldn't stop the inevitable. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Marcus, the human pilot, was preparing for a mission he never expected. He was a seasoned veteran, someone who had been flying solo for years. His ship, a sleek, compact vessel designed for quick escapes and precision strikes, was far smaller than the alien cruiser, but it was fast and nimble, perfect for the job ahead. Marcus was a man of action, not words. He had seen his fair share of chaos in the universe, but something about the distress signal from the alien cruiser caught his attention. It wasn't just a cry for help, it felt desperate. He'd heard of the Valsorians before, a powerful and proud alien race known for their advanced technology and arrogance. Humans and Valsorians didn't exactly get along, and Marcus knew well that his people weren't exactly seen as equals in the galaxy. He wasn't supposed to interfere. It wasn't part of his mission. But Marcus had never been one to follow orders if it meant leaving someone in need behind. He made a quick decision. He'd help, no matter the risks. If it meant saving the life of an alien, even one from a species that viewed humans as weak, then that was what he'd do. He engaged the engines of his ship and rocketed through the stars. Marcus checked his instruments. The alien cruiser was in bad shape. It was already losing altitude, heading toward the dangerous gravity pull of a nearby planet. He could see it now, just ahead of him, its lights flickering as if on the brink of going out. "All right, here we go," Marcus muttered to himself. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. The Valsorians might not know it, but they had a human pilot to thank for the chance at survival. The communication channel crackled to life again as Lyra's voice came through, strong yet filled with frustration. "Human pilot, stay away. This is not your fight." Marcus didn't flinch. He had expected this response. "I'm not going anywhere. You're out of time. I'll be there in 10 minutes. There was a long pause before Lyra spoke again, her tone softer but still defiant. "I told you have no place here." But Marcus was already focused on his approach. He adjusted the speed of his ship, expertly weaving through debris from the battle and avoiding enemy fire. He wasn't just a pilot, he was someone who knew how to think on his feet and react quickly. His heart raced, but his mind was sharp. As he closed in on the cruiser, the enemy ships, noticing the new threat, shifted their focus to him. They began firing at Marcus, trying to intercept him before he could reach the Valsorian ship. His small craft was faster and more maneuverable, but he wasn't invincible. "Let's see if I can make it," Marcus muttered under his breath as he dodged a series of incoming blasts. His hands moved quickly, guiding his ship in a dizzying dance through space. He could feel the heat of the enemy fire just behind him, his ship shuddering with each narrow escape. But he wasn't going to stop. Not now. With one final maneuver, Marcus slid his ship past the enemy attackers and shot ahead, heading straight for the disabled Valsorian cruiser. The enemy ships tried to follow, but they were too slow. Marcus had made his move. It was now or never. On the bridge of the alien cruiser, Lyra watched in disbelief as the human pilot raced toward them. She had heard the rumors about humans, how they were resourceful and persistent, but she had never imagined one would risk everything for a species they had no reason to care about. She felt a mixture of awe and confusion, her thoughts racing. She knew her people would never understand. The Valsorians would never have helped a human in need. The idea was unthinkable. And yet here was Marcus, a human, coming to their aid without hesitation. "Captain, the human pilot is nearing our position," the communication officer reported. Lyra took a deep breath, watching the small human ship zoom toward her, a beacon of hope amid the chaos. Despite everything, despite the pride of her people, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for this unexpected savior. Still, she would not let her guard down. If he couldn't deliver, she would not hesitate to make her escape without him. As Marcus closed the gap, the enemy ships began to retreat, realizing that the human pilot wasn't going to give up. Lyra knew this was her chance. The cruiser was falling into the pull of the nearby planet's gravity, and if she didn't act fast, it would crash. "Prepare to stabilize the cruiser," she ordered. "If the human can help us, we'll take it. If not, do we make our exit?" Marcus's heart raced as he navigated his ship closer to the Valsorian cruiser. The massive ship loomed in front of him, its once gleaming exterior now battered and smoking. The enemy ships had fallen back, but they weren't far. Marcus could hear the faint crackle of static through his comms as he adjusted his ship's speed. His fingers tightened on the controls. His focus sharp, there was no turning back now. Lyra, I'm almost there. Hold on, he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. On the bridge of the Valsorian cruiser, Lyra stood frozen. She could see the human pilot's small craft closing in on them through the viewport. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, frustration, and something else, gratitude. She hadn't expected this. She had heard of human resourcefulness, but this was more than she could have imagined. The Valsorians had always believed they were the most powerful race in the galaxy. The idea of asking or even accepting help from a human was unheard of. Yet here was Marcus, risking his life to save her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the blaring alarms on the bridge. Captain, the gravity pull is becoming stronger. We don't have much time. The communications officer shouted. Lyra's chest tightened. She had been prepared to evacuate her crew, but with the ship in such a precarious position, there was no guarantee they could get away in time. She had no choice. If Marcus could help, it was their only chance. Marcus, I need you to stabilize our ship, she ordered, her voice steady but urgent. Our engines are down, and we're falling into the planet's gravity. I need your ship to assist with the maneuvering. She didn't know what he could do, but she had to believe that he could. If anyone had the ability to turn this around, it was the human who had already defied her expectations. Marcus's voice came through, calm as ever. I've got it, Lyra. Stay with me. With a deep breath, Marcus guided his ship into position beside the cruiser. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but he had done this before. The Valsorian cruiser was large, its shape unlike anything he had ever dealt with, but the enemy ships had forced him to think quickly. He knew that he couldn't allow it to fall into the hands of the enemy. Using his small, nimble ship, Marcus attached a tether to the Valsorian. CRUICR. He had readied his ship's engines to assist with the momentum, hoping that his calculations were correct. The tether was now the only thing holding the two ships together. It was a long shot, but Marcus wasn't about to back down now. Hold on, Lyra, he said again, focusing all his attention on the controls. I'll pull you out of this. Lyra watched in disbelief as the human ship moved with expert precision, expertly tethering itself to her cruiser. She couldn't believe how quickly he had reacted, how easily he had taken control of the situation. It was as though he had done this countless times before, even though, by all logic, he shouldn't have been able to do it at all. On the bridge, the crew watched anxiously. The tension in the air was thick as Lyra held her breath. Her mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. Could it really work? Was this human capable of saving them? Captain, the enemy ships are moving back in, the weapons officer reported. They're regrouping for another attack. Lyra clenched her fist. They didn't have much time. The tether was their only hope. She turned to the communications officer. Keep the shields up. We can't let them get a clear shot. Marcus's voice came through the comms again, steady and calm. I'm not letting you go, Lyra. Stay with me. We'll get through this. For a moment, there was only the sound of the ship's engines and the crackling of the comms. The tension was unbearable. The Valsorian cruiser was still dangerously close to falling into the planet's gravity. The enemy ships were closing in again, and Marcus's ship was the only thing standing between them and certain destruction. Then, with a powerful burst of energy from Marcus's ship, the tether between the two vessels tightened, and the Valsorian cruiser began to pull away from the gravity well. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she saw the ship start to move, slowly but surely. The human had done it. Marcus, you did it, she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. Marcus's reply was simple. We're not out of danger yet. Keep your crew steady. We've got a fight ahead. Lyra stood in awe. She had never imagined that a human someone her people had long looked down upon could achieve something so incredible. She had underestimated him, and now she was paying the price for it. But more than that, she was beginning to realize something. The strength of humans wasn't in their size or their technology. It was in their will. The battle wasn't over. The enemy ships were still out there, and the Valsorian cruiser was in no shape to fight. But for the first time since the ambush, Lyra felt a spark of hope. She had never expected to find it in the form of a human pilot. But here it was. The tension on the Valsorian cruiser was still thick. The crew had managed to stabilize the ship, but the repairs were only temporary. The enemy ships were retreating for now, but Lyra knew it wouldn't be long before they returned. The question was, what were they going to do next? Lyra stood at the command station, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. The human pilot, Marcus, had saved them. There was no doubt about it. He had done something that no one else had been able to do, pulling her cruiser from the brink of disaster. For the first time in a long while, she felt a strange sense of gratitude. But with that gratitude came confusion. How could she, a Valsorian captain, accept help from a human? Her people believed themselves to be the greatest force in the galaxy, superior to all others. To accept help from a human, someone her species considered inferior, went against everything she had been taught. She turned to face the communication officer, her thoughts still swirling. "Where is the human now?" she asked. The officer looked up, glancing at the screen. "He's holding position just outside our cruiser's range. He's waiting for further instructions." Lyra sighed. She couldn't deny it any longer. They needed him. Without his quick thinking and daring actions, they would have been lost. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Could they really rely on him? Or would he turn on them when it suited him? Her thoughts were interrupted as the comms system beeped. It was Marcus. "Lyra, this is Marcus. You're out of the gravity well, but the enemy won't be far behind. You need to make a decision. Stay here and repair the ship or move to a safer location." Lyra hesitated. The ship needed time to repair, but if they stayed in this location, they would be sitting ducks. She had to admit, Marcus had a point. They couldn't waste any more time. "We'll move," she replied, her voice steady. "Prepare for a course change. We'll head to the nearest safe zone." There was a pause on the comms before Marcus spoke again. "Understood. I'll provide cover from here. Just let me know when you're ready." Lyra was surprised at how quickly he had responded, almost as if he had already anticipated her answer. He was a human, and yet he seemed to understand the urgency of the situation better than some of her own crew members. As she gave orders for the ship to begin moving, Lyra couldn't help but feel conflicted. On one hand, she was grateful to Marcus for his help, but on the other hand, she was starting to question everything she had been taught about humans. How could they be so weak, and yet still so capable? Her mind was pulled in two directions. The Valsorians had always been taught to view humans as inferior. They were small, fragile creatures, easily crushed by stronger forces. But here was Marcus, a human, doing something that no Valsorian had been able to do. He had saved her ship and her crew. "What are you thinking, Captain?" The voice of her first officer broke through her thoughts. Lyra glanced at him, his expression unreadable. She could tell that he was waiting for her to make the next move, to give the orders that would decide their fate. But how could she? The Valsorians had always prided themselves on their strength. They had always believed that they didn't need anyone else. But now, Lyra wasn't so sure. "I'm thinking that we owe him," Lyra said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand it, but we owe him." The first officer raised an eyebrow. "A human, Captain?" "Yes," Lyra replied firmly, "a human." The rest of the crew seemed just as conflicted. There was a deep sense of unease in the air, as if they were all grappling with the same question. Could they trust Marcus? Could they rely on a human for help? In the future? Lyra's mind wandered back to the moment when Marcus had attached his ship to the cruiser, pulling them away from the planet's gravity. It had been an incredible feat, one that no one could have predicted. For a brief moment, she had seen the human for what he was, not weak, not insignificant, but someone who was willing to fight for survival, no matter the cost. As the cruiser began to move toward the safe zone, Lyra gave the order to contact Marcus. Her thoughts were clearer now, and she knew what she had to do. "Marcus," she began, her voice steady, "we're moving toward the safe zone. We'll need your assistance with defense once we get there." There was a brief silence on the other end, and then Marcus's voice came through, calm as ever. "I'm ready when you are, Lyra. I won't let them get to you." Lyra felt a small sense of relief. She wasn't sure what had changed, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time, she realized that perhaps the Vosorians weren't the only ones with strength. Maybe there was something else, something unexpected in the humans after all. "Thank you, Marcus," she said softly. "We'll make it through this together." The comms crackled with static as Marcus's voice came through one last time. "Just stay safe. I'll be here when you need me." As the Valsorian cruiser made its way toward the safe zone, the crew began their repairs. The enemy ships had retreated. For now, but the battle wasn't over. Lyra knew that once they reached the safe zone, they would have to be ready to defend themselves again. But for now, there was a brief moment of calm. Lyra stood at the command station, watching the stars. Outside, her thoughts were far away, lost in a sea of conflicting emotions. She had never imagined that a human could be capable of so much. She had seen the strength of the Valsorians, the power of their ships, and the superiority of their technology. But Marcus, the human pilot, had done what no one else could. Her mind wandered back to the moment when Marcus had saved them. She had been so sure that there was no hope. But then, out of nowhere, a human had arrived, offering help when no one else would. The thought left her with a strange feeling she couldn't explain. On the other side of the comms, Marcus was already waiting. His ship had provided cover for the Valsorian cruiser, and he had kept the enemy at bay while they made their escape. Lyra had ordered the crew to continue repairs, but she knew they weren't ready yet. There was still a long way to go before they could face the enemy again. And there was one more thing on her mind. "Marcus, Marcus," Lyra said into the comms, her voice steady. "We're in the safe zone. The cruiser is being repaired, but we still need to be on alert. We're not out of danger yet." Marcus's voice came through clear and calm. "Understood. I'll keep watch. Just let me know if you need anything." Lyra paused, unsure of what to say next. She had never had a human pilot at her disposal before, much less one who had gone so far out of his way to help her. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile beings, incapable of standing up to the might of the Valsorians. But Marcus had done something no one else had been able to do. He had saved her, and in doing so had shattered everything she had believed. "Thank you, Marcus," Lyra said, her voice softer than she intended. I don't know how we would have made it without you." There was a long silence before Marcus replied, "You don't need to thank me, Lyra. It's just what I do." But Lyra couldn't ignore the way his words made her feel. There was something in the human's voice, something raw and honest that made her question everything she had been taught. She had always believed that humans were incapable of understanding the true meaning of strength. But here, in this moment, Marcus had shown her what true strength really was. She stared at the comms panel for a moment, lost in thought. Her crew had always looked up to her, relied on her for guidance, but now she wasn't so sure. The Valsorians had always been taught that they were the greatest, the strongest, the most powerful. But what if they had been wrong? What if there was more to strength than just power and technology? As Lyra pondered these questions, she glanced around the bridge. Her crew was hard at work, but there was an air of uncertainty among them. They had always believed in their superiority. Now, with the human pilot's unexpected intervention, they were beginning to question their beliefs. They didn't say it aloud, but Lyra could see it in their eyes. They were starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, humans were more than they appeared to be. Lyra stood up from the command station, her gaze still fixed on the stars outside. The universe was vast and filled with unknowns. She had never expected to find herself in a situation like this, relying on a human pilot to save her and her crew. But now she found herself facing a new reality, one where humans were no longer just weak, fragile beings. They were something more. She turned to her first officer, who had been quietly observing her. "What do you think of him?" she asked. Her voice quieter than usual. The first officer gave a small shrug. "He did what needed to be done. And he didn't hesitate even when it wasn't his fight." Lyra nodded, her mind still racing. "He's not what I expected. He doesn't act like the humans we've been told about." The first officer raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps we've underestimated them all along." Lyra's gaze drifted back to the comms panel. "Perhaps," she muttered. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. The universe was full of surprises, and Marcus, the human pilot, had been one of the biggest surprises of all. As the repairs continued, Lara thought about what she had learned in the past few hours. She had seen a side of humans she had never imagined, and as strange as it felt, she was beginning to respect them. She sat back down at the command station and spoke again into the comms. "Marcus," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I want to know more about you, your people. How do humans survive in a galaxy so dangerous, where others look down on you?" There was a brief silence on the other end, but when Marcus spoke again, his voice was filled with honesty. "We survive because we don't give up. No matter what, we fight for what we believe in." Lyra smiled softly. "I think I'm beginning to understand." Lyra's Valsorian cruiser was still in the safe zone, but every moment of peace felt like a temporary reprieve. The repairs were progressing slowly. Despite the best efforts of the crew, the damage was too severe for them to fully fix in such a short time. They were vulnerable, exposed, and the enemy wasn't likely to leave them alone for long. As Lyra sat at the command station, her mind raced with possible scenarios. Her people were proud, and they didn't give up easily, but she knew that the enemy had more ships, more firepower. They couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. "Captain, we've completed some repairs, but we're still not at full power," the engineer said, his voice full of concern. "We'll need more time to get the weapon systems back online." Lyra nodded, keeping her gaze fixed on the tactical readouts in front of her. "How much time?" "At least an hour before we're ready for combat," the engineer replied. She was about to respond when the communications officer's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, we've detected enemy ships approaching. It looks like they've regrouped. They're coming for us." The words hit Lyra like a shockwave. She stood up quickly, her mind immediately going into overdrive. The enemy had returned, and they were ready to finish what they had started. "Status of our defenses?" Lyra asked, her voice calm but urgent. "We're running on minimal power," the officer replied. "Our shields are weak, and the weapon systems are offline. We'll have to rely on the human pilot for support once again." Lyra didn't need to be told twice. She activated the comms and called Marcus. There was no time to waste. "Marcus, the enemy is coming back. We need your help. We're not ready to fight on our own yet." There was a brief pause on the other end before Marcus replied. His voice was steady and confident. "I'm already on my way. I'll keep them off." "You're back until you're ready." Lyra didn't waste any more time. She turned to her crew, her orders quick and decisive. "Prepare for battle. Get the shields up and ready the weapons as much as we can. We need to be able to defend ourselves." Her crew moved quickly, each person falling into their roles without hesitation. Despite the damage to their ship, there was a sense of purpose in the air. They were determined to fight back, and Lyra could feel the shift in their attitude. The sense of defeat was gone, replaced by the same determination that Marcus had shown. As the enemy ships closed in, Lyra's fingers flew over the control panel, trying to make the most of what little they had. She knew they couldn't go head-to-head with the enemy yet, but they had to buy enough time for the repairs to be completed. The human pilot was their only hope for now. Outside the cruiser, Marcus's small ship darted around the enemy fleet, drawing their attention. Lyra could see him on the screen, expertly dodging blasts and weaving in and out of the larger ships. It was a risky move, but Marcus had shown that he wasn't afraid to take risks. "Watch out!" the tactical officer shouted. "One of the enemy ships is locking onto us." "We need to move now." Lyra's eyes narrowed. She quickly gave the order for the cruiser to move, her heart pounding as she watched Marcus continue to engage the enemy. His ship was fast, nimble, and well-suited to this kind of fight, but he couldn't do it alone. "Marcus, keep them distracted for as long as you can," Lyra said, her voice firm. "We're almost there. Just a little longer." She watched as Marcus's ship weaved between enemy fire, his skill as a pilot on full display. Lyra couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration for him. He wasn't just fighting for his survival, he was fighting for them, for a species that had always looked down on his kind. It was an act of bravery that Lyra hadn't expected, and it made her question everything she thought she knew about humans. The battle raged on, the sounds of enemy fire filling the air. Lyra could feel the tension rising, but she remained focused. She had to trust Marcus. He had already proven that he could get them out of the most dangerous situations. Now, it was up to her crew to finish the repairs and get their weapons back online. The minutes dragged on like hours. Lyra's crew worked tirelessly, and Marcus continued to keep the enemy at bay. It wasn't long before the Valsorian cruiser's shields flickered back to life. The glow of the protective energy surrounding the ship. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do for now. "We're ready," the engineer called out. "Weapons are online? We can fight back?" Lyra's eyes gleamed with determination. "It's time," she said, her voice cold with resolve. All hands prepare to engage. As the Valsorian cruiser powered up its weapons systems, the enemy ships began to close in, thinking that they had the upper hand. But they hadn't counted on the human pilot or on the Valsorian resolve. "Marcus, we're ready to fight back," Lyra said, her voice steady. "Give us your position, and we'll cover you." Marcus's voice crackled through the comms. "I've got your back. Just make sure you don't miss." With that, the battle began anew. The Valsorian cruiser, now fully powered, joined the fight, its weapons firing with precision. Marcus continued to dodge and weave, drawing enemy fire away from the cruiser while Lyra and her crew picked off their attackers one by one. The tide was turning. The Valsorians and humans, once divided by pride and distrust, were now united in a common cause: survival. The battle was fierce, but the Valsorian cruiser had found new strength. Lyra stood at the command station, her focus unwavering as the ship's weapons fired with precision, taking down enemy ships one by one. The crew worked as one, and despite the damage to the cruiser, they were holding their ground. Marcus's ship darted around the enemy, its speed and agility proving to be a decisive advantage. He had become an unexpected ally, and Lyra couldn't deny the respect she felt for him now. The human pilot was doing what no one else could, drawing fire from the enemy and allowing the Valsorians to push forward in the fight. "Captain, we're taking down their ships," the tactical officer reported, his voice filled with excitement. "The enemy is retreating." Lyra allowed herself a small but brief smile. "Stay sharp, they'll be back, but we've got this for now." The Valsorian cruiser's shields were holding strong, and the weapons were dealing damage with precision. The tide of battle had shifted. The enemy was retreating, but Lyra knew it wouldn't be long before they regrouped. They had to be ready for the next fight. As the last of the enemy ships turned and fled, the crew exhaled in unison. The ship was damaged, but they had survived. Lyra could feel the weight of the moment. The danger had passed for now, but the journey was far from over. They were still in enemy territory, and she had to think about the future. The comms crackled to life, and Marcus's voice came through, steady and calm as ever. "Lyra, it looks like we're clear for now." "I'll keep watch, but you've got a window to make your next move." Lyra turned to her first officer, her thoughts racing. "What's our status?" "We've taken damage, but we're holding together," the first officer replied. "The engines are still functional, but we can't keep up this pace for long. We need to get back to a secure location to repair properly," Lyra nodded. "Marcus, we need to fall back and make repairs. Take us to the nearest safe zone." "Copy that," Marcus replied. "I'll cover your rear until you're out of danger." Lyra watched the readouts as her ship began to move toward the safe zone. It wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time she felt a sense of relief. She had survived, and so had her crew. And it was all thanks to Marcus as they traveled through the quiet space. Lyra couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. She had always seen the Valsorians as the most powerful race in the galaxy. They had technology, strength, and influence. But what had she learned in the past hours? Strength wasn't just about power, it was about resilience, about never giving up when the odds were against you. And in that, the human pilot had shown her something she could never have imagined. "Marcus," Lyra said, her voice soft over the comms. "Thank you for everything." There was a brief silence on the other end before Marcus spoke. "You don't need to thank me. We're in this together, right? Lyra paused, her heart stirring at his words. She realized something in that moment, something she hadn't fully understood before. The bond between her and Marcus, between the Valsorians and humans, wasn't just about fighting together. It was about understanding each other, trusting each other. They had been enemies, but now, after what they had shared, there was something else. There was respect. We are? Lyra replied, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. And maybe we always were. The cums crackled, and Marcus's voice came through again. The safe zone's not far. Stay steady and we'll get there. As they continued their journey, the quiet hum of the ship filled the air. The crew was exhausted, but they were alive. They had faced down the impossible and come through together. And Lyra realized that she had learned something important, not just about Marcus, but about herself. She had always thought of humans as weak, as something less than the Valsorians. But now she knew better. Humans weren't weak, they were survivors. They were fighters. And together they could face anything.